Hello and welcome to the Practical Animal channel. Today we talk about how to attract garden birds to your garden fast. So this is in the situation where if you haven't fed the garden birds for many months, how do you resume an old habit and start to put out food for them? Or indeed, if you never did feed the birds, how do you start to get them coming to your garden? It all comes down to food. Today we're talking about calci-worms. I lived abroad for many years, and when I came back to the UK, I was astonished at the diversity of feeders and food available to feed our garden birds. Over the past weeks and months, I've been researching what is available and the prices that foods are available at. Today's subject, as I say, is calci-worms. What are calci-worms? These are. They're about just over a centimetre long. They look like mealworms. Mealworms are very, very similar in appearance. These are calci-worms, and they're good for attracting garden birds fast, because for insectivorous birds, they look like their natural diet. So they look like the larvae of beetles or any other insect that produces a larva as the immature stage. If we're talking about complete metamorphosis, that's a different subject. So calci-worms, depending on which shop you go to, the price will vary. How to use them? Well, as I've said in a previous video, everything must be kept fresh. So let's assume you have one of those commercially available bird feeding stations. You need to place that bird feeding station in a safe place in your garden. If you have a very small garden, then what you need to do is bear in mind you may have cats visiting the garden. You need to place the feeder as close as possible to any areas of refuge so that garden birds can escape if they feel threatened from predators. Alternatively, you could put the commercial feeder in the middle of the garden or towards the middle of the garden. That way, any garden birds will be able to see predators approach from a distance and they'll be able to fly to safety. I keep my bird food in sealable containers, and those are kept in a closable plastic storage box which I keep outside as well. That's for hygienic purposes. I don't keep the bird food in the house. That comes down to personal preference as well as hygiene practices. It's really up to you. I keep the bird food in these hermetically sealed storage boxes, and in the morning my routine is to put the bird food out, in this case the calci-worms, first thing in the morning. So in British midwinter, that's 8 o'clock in the morning. The food stays out all day until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's dusk in the British winter. It comes in, it's stored, and it goes out again in the morning. That's the routine, and that routine keeps the bird food fresh. That being the case, using calci-worms, or indeed mealworms, which are very similar, if you've not been feeding the birds for many months, in a sort of experiment that I did, I had birds coming down to my garden after 4 days of that routine. So, calci-worms, high in protein, highly digestible protein, and high in calcium. The first birds to come down to my feeding station within 4 days of starting the process again were starlings. I like starlings, I think they're beautiful birds, as I've mentioned in a previous video. A couple of days later, blackbirds started to turn up, and then pied wagtails. All this within about a 10-day period. So, in a nutshell, calci-worms or mealworms, that'll bring the birds down. and depending on the area where you live, it may be many weeks or months before any other birds come down. So if the birds are happy with mealworms, if they're happy with calci-worms, you can save money by just sticking to that diet until you start to see a variety of other birds come down, and that's the time to start experimenting again with other foods. But in terms of, let's say, ecological economics, stick to the one food that works if you're starting in midwinter, calci-worms or mealworms, and the birds will come down. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's answered some questions that you have about bringing garden birds into your garden fast. If it has, please click like. And for more exclusive content on wildlife, the countryside and animal management, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much.